Good evening. I'm Zincle Asamoah. Thanks for tuning in to Now Tonight. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and it's been a very busy Monday. Here's what's in store. Breaking news out of Los Angeles, disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein found guilty of rape and sexual assault. We'll break down the verdict. Potential criminal prosecution. The House January 6 committee approves criminal referrals against former President Donald Trump.
No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office.
Migrant crisis. The mayor of El Paso is the latest leader to declare a state of emergency. Another mayor who's done the same for his city, Michael Hancock of Denver.
We are at the brink of stressing our agencies and needing to free up resources as quickly as possible to meet the urgency.
He joins me live this hour. Then dashing into snow. A huge portion of the country is gearing up for a very, very white Christmas. We'll have your full forecast. Plus, drag debate, the controversy over new legislation in Tennessee that would put an end to drag shows.
So right now, if that law passes, I would be committing a potential felony. Just letting you know.
Now tonight, after nearly 10 days of deliberations, a Los Angeles jury has found Harvey Weinstein guilty of raping a woman. We want to warn you, some of what we'll be discussing is graphic and may be disturbing. The jury, made up of 4 women and 8 men, found the former media mogul guilty on 3 counts: forcible oral copulation, sexual penetration by foreign object, and forcible rape. Weinstein was acquitted for 1 count of sexual battery. The jury was hung on 3 other counts, including a 2nd count of rape. Weinstein pleaded not guilty and denied all allegations of non-consensual sex. He also waived his right to testify during the trial. This verdict comes nearly 3 years after Weinstein was found guilty at a trial in New York for 3rd-degree rape. He has 21 years left to serve on that conviction. But New York's state Supreme Court agreed in August to consider his appeal. Joining us now to talk about this is criminal defense attorney Bernard Violona. She is a former prosecutor. We're so glad you're here, Bernarda. So let's just jump in here. Weinstein was found guilty on 3 counts for a woman referred to in this trial as Jane Doe number 1. Other charges were found not guilty or hung. So walk us through this verdict. What do you think sentencing may look like?
Well, thank you for having me. In terms of what we're dealing with, we know that in California, he was tried having to deal with sexual encounters with 4 different women. However, the jury only found him guilty as to 1 of those women. And we're talking about 3 counts as to that 1 woman being Jane Doe. Just on the top count itself, he's facing up to 12 years incarceration as to 1 of the counts that he was convicted of. Now, how does that affect the New York sentence? Because he's already serving 23 years that he will serve in a New York State prison. It's possible that the California judge can run that consecutive to the sentence that Harvey Weinstein is already facing in New York. In terms of what's going to happen to those charges where the jury was hung, meaning they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict, it will be up to the California prosecutor to determine whether they will retry Harvey Weinstein or whether they will dismiss those counts against Harvey Weinstein. But that's a long conversation the California district attorney will have to have with those victims, because their input is very necessary in order to make that determination. We already know he's 70 years old. He's very sick. At this point, he's going to die in jail.
And of course, the heart of this is the survivors. I do want to share a statement from one of them, Jane Doe 1, who, according to her lawyer, burst into uncontrollable tears when she heard the news. She said, quote, Harvey Weinstein forever destroyed a part of me that night in 2013. I will never get that back. The criminal trial was brutal. Weinstein's lawyers put me through hell on the witness stand, but I knew I had to see this through to the end, and I did. Those are her words. So Weinstein, as we know, was found guilty of all 3 counts brought forth by Jane Doe number 1, but nobody else. Does this surprise you?
No, I'm not surprised, because when you're dealing with sexual assault cases, unfortunately, when it comes to just testimony evidence, meaning the words coming out of these victims' mouths, it's very difficult for a jury of 12 who do not know you to make a determination based on believability, based on credibility, especially when we're talking about incidents that took place over 10 years ago, or some even longer than that. So I'm not surprised about that, because also you have the delay in when these women reported it. And we already know that it is very difficult for any sexual assault victim, one, to come forward, two, to actually tell this story. But it has a lot to do with the Me Too movement and that article by the New Yorker, and especially with the conviction that was seen in New York, where more women came forward. Remember, just doing the New York jury trial, it was like 2 days before the trial started that the first indictment in California came forward, and it only had 2 women on that indictment, and additional women came forward because of what happened in New York.
And Bernarda, I want to talk about one of those women. Lawyer Gloria Allred represented Jane Doe 2, Lauren Young, in this trial. Her charge of sexual battery by restraint was deemed a mistrial. First, let's take a listen.
I am glad that even though there was a mistrial today in reference to her, that she was very brave and testified against him. She also indicates that if, as, and when the prosecution decides to prosecute Mr. Weinstein again, she is willing to testify again in a third criminal trial.
So very briefly here, how might that work if Lauren was to testify for a third time?
Well, it's going to be the same as if she would have been testifying for the first time, with the exception of that her testimony that she gave in New York, as well as doing the first trial in California, she's going to be crossed on that testimony if she testifies inconsistent to what she has already said. We know that Lauren played a huge role in the New York trial. She came in as a prior bad act witness. In terms of the California case, she came in as a victim. So, yes, I give her for her being courageous, and I applaud her for the strength that she has to constantly undergo this scrutiny and to appear before a jury, and also having her name out there as a victim. But she's not just a victim, she's a survivor.
Absolutely. The survivor stories are incredibly important. Bernarda, thank you so much for your insights. And for the first time in American history, Congress has referred a former president of the United States for criminal prosecution.
The committee believes that more than sufficient evidence exists for a criminal referral of former President Trump for assisting or aiding and comforting those at the Capitol who engaged in a violent attack on the United States.
Today, the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol accused former President Trump of inciting insurrection, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an act of Congress. This brings an end to the year-and-a-half investigation, which included thousands of hours of interviews and 10 televised hearings into Trump's attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election.
And who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office.
Now, it is important to note that the committee's criminal referrals are just that, referrals. They carry no legal weight whatsoever, meaning the Justice Department can choose to act on the committee's recommendations or not. Joining us now to talk about this is NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. Busy day, Ryan. So to start, walk us through what happens now.
Well, the committee still has to issue a final report, and we expect to see that in its totality later this week. On Wednesday is when they're expected to issue that final report. It will be thousands of pages, and from there it will have a list of legislative recommendations that future Congresses can choose to enact or not enact, and then it will have all the details and evidence that the Department of Justice can take or leave as it relates to these criminal referrals that they issued today. As you rightly point out, these are just suggestions by this panel, but it does carry a little bit more weight than if you or I asked the Department of Justice to investigate someone or prosecute them. And the committee has made it very clear over the past year and a half that they really believe, based on all the evidence that they've collected, all the interviews that they've conducted, and all the information that they've pieced together, that Donald Trump specifically is guilty of a number of crimes, specifically crimes that led to the insurrection here at the Capitol and also potentially stood in the way of a peaceful transfer of power. So it does put a little bit of pressure on the special counsel that's now investigating the former president's role in all of this. They do not have to take these recommendations, but now with all this evidence out there for every American to see, it does make it just a little bit more difficult for them to turn a complete blind eye.
And Ryan, I know the committee released an executive summary that's more than 150 pages. No light read there, but lucky us, you read it for us. So what does it contain, and what will the written report contain when we see it later this week?
Yeah, I mean, the executive summary really read as kind of the greatest hits of everything that they've been doing over the past year and a half. And if you haven't been paying that close attention to the January 6th Select Committee, this is a way to kind of catch up on the other 9 hearings that they held, with the kind of an outline of all the different things that they've pieced together and collected. It also includes the specificity behind these criminal referrals and highlights of the evidence they believe that they've collected. But it is just a snapshot of this overall final report that we're expecting in a couple of days. There is a lot of information that this committee has collected. There are a lot of conclusions that they've drawn. They want this to be the definitive narrative as to what happened on January 6th, not just on the day itself, but everything that happened leading up to January 6th, where the former president and those around him attempted to prevent the peaceful transfer of power. This, they believe, will tell the entire story, and it's something that we'll finally be able to read on Wednesday.
Well, we know you'll keep digging into it for us. Ryan Nobles, thank you so much. And now let's get more into this with Jill Wine-Banks, former assistant Watergate special prosecutor and an NBC News contributor, and Carlos Curbelo, a former Republican congressman from Florida and an NBC News political analyst. Thank you both for being here. So, Jill, let's start with you. How will the Department of Justice determine whether to ultimately file these charges?
The department will do what the department always does. It will gather all of the facts. It will then look at the law and apply the facts to the law. It will do that based only on that. The referral is important because it gives one viewpoint of what the facts show, but more importantly is the report and the release of thousands of pages of information. That information will be helpful in determining whether there is anything that the department didn't know already, because remember, they've gotten really into this investigation and are doing a good job of that. So do they have anything that's inconsistent with what the report shows? Is there anything exculpatory in what the department has that the Congress didn't have? So that's what they'll be doing, is in order to determine whether they can obtain and sustain a conviction. That's how they will determine what to do.
Okay, that's really helpful. So, Carlos, then let's talk about former President Trump, because Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell released a statement, and in it, it said the entire nation knows who is responsible for that day. Beyond that, I don't have any immediate observations. Do you think today's news will change anything for Trump supporters and the Republican Party?
Well, we are seeing an erosion in Donald Trump's base. Sure, he still has a lot of Republicans in his corner, a lot of people who would like to see him become president again, but he is way off of his highs. Now, unlike maybe a year ago, more Republicans are saying that they identify as Republicans first and as Trump supporters second. So while there's still a lot of people behind Trump, all of these processes, all of these controversies, and a lot of the terrible statements that he has made in recent weeks and months has really hurt him, not just with the people who already didn't like Trump, but with his supporters, with a lot of Republicans who remained loyal to him for a very long time. We're seeing some serious erosion. We're seeing a lot of Republicans prefer candidates like Ron DeSantis and others instead of Donald Trump for the 2024 Republican primary elections.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about 2024 in time, but I do also want to talk about the Democratic response today. Jill, we heard remarks from Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff. First, let's take a listen, and then we'll talk on the other side.
No one should get a pass. And I think the day we start giving passes to presidents or former presidents or people of power or influence is the day we can say that this was the beginning of the end of our democracy.
So, Jill, broadly, how does the DOJ prosecute Trump without seeming partisan, especially on the cusp of a 2024 election?
I think that Adam Schiff said it as well as anyone could. You cannot give a pass just because someone used to be in office. What the president did is significant. What his crimes are based on facts. And that's what the decision will be made on, not anything else.
Yeah, and Carlos, I know notably Republicans are expected to release a counter report in the coming days. Do you think that will stick?
Well, I think what will be interesting to monitor is how many Republicans actually come out and vocally defend Donald Trump. This is what Republicans have been accustomed have become accustomed to doing over the last 5 or 6 years, always coming out in Donald Trump's defense. I think this time it's going to be different. Just like you didn't see very many Republicans come out and defend him when he had these recent meetings with anti-Semites and white supremacists. I think you're going to see a similar dynamic now, whereas before Republicans would have come out and aggressively defended Trump. Perhaps they might criticize the committee. They might say that it was a partisan committee, even though there were 2 Republicans on that committee. But I don't think we're going to see that same enthusiasm for Republicans for defending Trump. These are gradual, small changes in the Republican Party, but I do believe that they are significant and indicative of where the party is going and where Donald Trump is going.
And of course, in all this, we have to talk about how Trump has responded. He spoke on Truth Social by saying, quote, "These folks don't get it, that when they come after me, people who love freedom rally around me. It strengthens me. What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." I think that last part may be a reference to a popular song. So what does Trump's defense look like right now, Jill?
His defense is the same as it has always been: lies. And it's lies that are unfortunately believed by millions of people. So in a sense, what he said is true. His supporters don't care about facts. In the days of Watergate, it was a time when we had only 3 networks. They all had the same fact. It was a time of bipartisanship where it was the Republicans who went to President Nixon and said, "You must resign or you will be convicted by the Senate." We know what the facts are. And while it is true the Department of Justice has a much higher standard of proof because they have to prove all of these crimes that are referred beyond a reasonable doubt, I think the evidence supports that. And I believe that a jury, when charged with the obligation of making a decision based on the facts presented in a courtroom, will agree that Donald Trump is guilty of these crimes, all of the crimes, including the insurrection one.
And Carlos, I do want to end with you here because you're a former Republican congressman. So how does this impact Trump's 2024 run, if at all? What's your take?
Well, I think this is going to continue to hurt him. Republicans want to win in 2024, and Republicans are starting to realize that Donald Trump makes them lose. Donald Trump, sure, he did win the presidency in 2016. After that, it was all downhill. Republicans lost the House in 2018. They lost the presidency in 2020. They've lost the Senate. And now in this election, they significantly underperformed. A lot of Republicans are blaming Donald Trump for them failing to meet expectations in this 2022 primary election. So I think you're going to continue to see that erosion of the Trump base. It's not going to happen in an immediate fashion, but Donald Trump will continue losing support and will continue slipping into irrelevance.
Well, important perspectives from both sides of the aisle. Jill Wine-Banks and Carlos Curbelo, thank you both so much. And on the other side of Washington, the Supreme Court is ordering a temporary stay of Title 42. The pandemic-era policy allows officials to turn away migrants due to public health concerns. It was set to expire on Wednesday. The brief order came from Chief Justice John Roberts. Again, it is temporary until the court can respond to an emergency appeal by 19 attorneys general from Republican-led states. Many of the migrants arriving at the southern border are well aware of Title 42. This morning, while reporting for our colleague, Jose Diaz-Balart, NBC's Guad Venegas asked one man from Venezuela how word spreads.
¿Tienes una forma de leer noticias o cómo se enteran todos de lo que está pasando en la frontera de las noticias? How do you guys find out about the news at the border?
Sí, hay unos que se enteran por noticias.
¿Y las noticias dónde las ven? Where do you watch the news? Is it celular. Sí. ¿Y qué es lo que saben de las noticias? So they use their cell phone to find the news. ¿Qué se enteran al leer las noticias?
No, lo que se enteran ellos lo transmiten a todos.
A todos los demás. So one of the guys will get the news, and usually they spread the word, Jose. He's saying that they spread the word to each other, and that's how they have learned that on the 21st, Title 42 is set to expire. So this is what's still happening here.
Such important reporting from Guad Venangas there. He was reporting earlier from Ciudad Juarez. That city is located across the border from El Paso, Texas, which declared a state of emergency over the weekend. The mayor there predicts up to 6,000 migrants will cross the border daily if Title 42 is lifted. El Paso is the second recent U.S. city to declare an emergency in response to the influx of migrants. Denver did the same just last week. Here to discuss is the mayor of Denver, Michael Hancock, who just days ago declared a state of emergency over this issue in his own city. Welcome, Mayor. So let's jump in here. What is your reaction to the Supreme Court stay maintaining Title 42?
Oh, thanks for having me. You know, the way I look at it is, you know, regardless of Title 42 in place right now, cities are really severely challenged with the number of migrants and refugee asylum seekers that are coming into our cities. And so, you know, the Supreme Court made its decision. Ultimately, there will be further deliberation next week. But right now, cities from San Diego to New York City, from Chicago to El Paso, including Denver, Colorado, are under stress, trying to deal with the number of migrants that are surging into our cities.
And you said cities are under stress. So let's dig into that. What is the situation in your city right now? What do those stressors look like?
We've had since December 9th, when I activated our Emergency Operations Center, some 1,146 migrants come to the city of Denver. Nothing compared to what's happening in El Paso and other cities like Tucson, Arizona. But, you know, comparatively, proportionally, that is a challenge for a city like Denver, Colorado. We spent in excess of $800,000, probably close to $1 million now. And that puts a stress on our city finances and our situation. We've also had our shelters being overrun with migrants and asylum seekers trying to seek shelter. And as we forecast situations right now, we, in terms of our weather, we're expecting a pretty severe Arctic front to hit the city of Denver by Thursday or later this week. And that's going to further, I think, overwhelm our system. So we've had to open up two of our recreation centers for emergency shelters for our migrants, as well as take one other shelter, our recreation center, offline for a reception center. We want to do everything we can in a humane manner to help them, but we need our federal government to step in, to lean in, to be a partner, and help us to manage the situation.
And an important point to mention, right, is that an emergency declaration is not just a means of sounding an alarm, but it's also a tool for getting resources. So what resources has your city gotten so far, and what do you still need?
Quite frankly, I issued the emergency declaration not to sound an alarm, as you pointed out, and not to really seek resources. We were going to turn to the federal government anyway, because this is their making, and they quite frankly, this is their area where they should be working with cities. This was for me internally and my administration to kind of free up my ability to procure services and resources quickly, to have the sense of urgency to meet the challenge of the time that we have. We didn't have the time to go through a process for procurement, bidding out, because the migrants were coming in as many as 134, like we saw last night, per day come into our city. We needed to meet the challenge with a sense of urgency, and this was to help me to suspend the procurement policy so that I could make the necessary purchases to meet the challenge.
And Mayor, you talked about this earlier, that this is all happening in the winter. Overnight temperatures in Denver are forecast to be below zero later this week. So how concerned are you about that specifically? Is there enough space to keep everyone warm? I heard you talk about sort of spontaneous shelters. What's it looking like?
Yeah, it's very concerning. Obviously, first, we think about everybody in our city and wanting to keep everyone safe and taken care of during the season. We have a homeless challenge in our city, as we are seeing across the nation. We've had open up warming centers and emergency shelters and recreation centers to accommodate those who are unhoused in our community before the migrants started coming, or at least before we started counting them. And now that we are seeing 130 people a day, 120 here, it only exacerbates that challenge. Again, right now I've got 480 8 people sheltered in our recreation centers. Some partners have taken another 150, and that's in addition to our normal unhoused sheltering system that we have. So we're almost at capacity. We're not there already. And unfortunately, it might render some people vulnerable to the Arctic blast that's about to come into our city, God forbid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a difficult time in general. So we're hoping those people stay safe. And as we mentioned, this is not just happening in your state. Texas Governor Greg Abbott told ABC yesterday that he believed lifting the provision would result in total chaos. So first, let's take a listen, and then we'll talk on the other side.
If the courts do not intervene and put a halt to the removal of Title 42, it's going to be total chaos. Whether it's COVID or some other issue, when you have people coming across the globe without knowing at all what their health status is, that almost by definition is a public health risk.
So, Mayor, what's your take? What do you predict will happen if the Supreme Court lets Title 42 expire?
Here's how I've been answering this. Regardless of the placement of Title 42, whether it's active or not, this nation of ours, and I've been calling for this prior to the pandemic, needs to come up with an immigration strategy. Cities and states are challenged right now with this issue because of the global crisis that's occurring in particularly third world countries. So the reality is, with or without Title 42, America, Congress needs to work with the administration to come up with an immigration policy so that we can deal with the issue of immigrants coming into our city, and we have the necessary resources. And so they have to lay those out as well, because this is a critical situation. Cities are bearing the brunt right now with our finite resources, trying to do the best we can to address this in a humane manner and to care for those who are coming into our cities. The federal government needs to lean in. Congress needs to lean in, do the work that the people have asked you to do when they sent you to Congress. Work with the administration. Let's go negotiate a strategy. In the meantime, they need to have an interim policy with or without Title 42. We need a policy to help cities address this challenge and also deal effectively with those who are trying to cross the border.
Well, Mayor Michael Hancock, thanks for making the time as you're leading your city through this challenging time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and happy holidays.
And up next, I have a question for the Twitter users out there. Do you think Elon Musk should stay in charge of the social media site? Don't get it twisted. It's not me asking. The billionaire wants to know. We'll explain after the break. Welcome back. I'm Zinklea Samoa. Now, get this. A majority of Twitter users have voted for Elon Musk to step down as head of the company. They did so in a poll he posted on the site yesterday. The poll was up for 12 hours asking, quote, should I step down as head of Twitter? I will abide by the results of this poll. Nearly 58% of the 17 million votes cast were in favor of Musk leaving his role as CEO, though notably the billionaire has not yet responded to the results. He did at one point tweet, quote, be careful what you wish, as you might get it. This is not the first time Musk has put things up for a vote on Twitter. Just last week, he suspended the accounts of several high-profile journalists after accusing them of violating Twitter's rules on personal privacy. Musk asked users if those accounts should be allowed back on the platform. Nearly 60% voted on doing so immediately. And guess what happened? Those accounts were reinstated early Saturday. A lot of back and forth there, and CNBC contributor and Wall Street Journal reporter Tim Higgins joins us now. Thankfully, we're not limited to 280 characters for this conversation, so let's dig in here. I actually want to start with some context that back in November, Musk did actually say that he does expect to find someone else to run Twitter over time. So do you think we'll see him follow through on this poll, asking whether he should run, or he or someone else should run the social media platform?
Well, in a lot of ways, it actually doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, he's the owner. This is a privately held company that he controls. So the day-to-day management might be turned over to somebody else. But make no mistake, he's ultimately the boss, and his will go. And we've seen that at his other companies, from Tesla to SpaceX to the startups that he runs. He is the boss. And sometimes he likes to complain about how he doesn't want to be the CEO and he finds it taxing. But at the end of the day, he wants to be calling the shots.
And I mean, to that end, right, the end of calling the shots. Just yesterday, we know Twitter started banning users from posting links to other social media accounts like Facebook, Instagram, and Truth Social. And after a lot of backlash, by just Sunday night, that policy basically vanished from Twitter's policy page. And Musk actually tweeted that, quote, going forward, there will be a vote for major policy changes. My apologies, won't happen again. So what exactly happened there?
Well, he's finding out firsthand that content moderation, that running one of these social media platforms is super messy and super complicated and really not as easy as perhaps he thought. Remember earlier this year when he was talking about what life would be like if he was to acquire Twitter, how he would handle content moderation. He really kind of described, in a sense, a Wild West world where free speech would live and only things that violated the law would be taken down. In reality, as owner, he is seeing that it's much more nuanced. It's much more murky and trying to create a world where users feel safe, where advertisers want to advertise, and where, he feels like he's having his say.
It's a bit like that meme. Instagram versus reality, what he thought it would be like and what it's actually like. A lot of that's playing out right now. And I want to pivot also, it's not just catching eyes online, but also catching the eyes of those here in Washington, D.C. We heard from Democratic Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts. She sent a letter to Tesla's board over the weekend asking if Elon Musk's actions at Twitter are shortchanging Tesla. Specifically, she wrote that the companies and boards need to ensure that a shareholder, essentially most likely alluding to Elon, quote, does not treat the company as a private plaything. Those are her words in the letter. So what else do we know about this letter? And can we see Congress get involved in a lot of this Twitter turmoil?
Well, this is just the latest pressure on Tesla's board and on Tesla. We have seen increasingly a number of investors over the last few days raise concerns about Elon's time and distraction of Twitter, really concerned about the state of the company. Now, Tesla is facing the same kind of macroeconomic hurdles that the automotive industry in general is facing on perhaps ahead of a recession. But still, there are some unique things that Tesla has. And these investors over the past few years have tended to be kind of forgiving or understanding of Elon's sideshows or these kind of antics of his, in large part because Tesla's shares have skyrocketed. They have gone to the moon and they have benefited greatly. At this point in the year, however, they're down something like 50%. So they're losing money likely, and they're not happy with Elon, who seems distracted.
For sure. I mean, it's been a busy time at Twitter, layoffs, debacles, lots of changes in leadership. So time will tell where it goes. Tim Higgins, thank you for making time for us tonight. And after the break, some other headlines we're following on Now Tonight, including the winter storm expected to bring a white Christmas and travel headaches. The seven-figure finale to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's legal drama, and the latest high-profile arrest in Iran, firing up protesters. Time now for some of the headlines we're watching on Now Tonight. Shooting in Canada. 5 people are dead after a shooting in a Toronto suburb late last night. A 6th person was shot, hospitalized, and is in serious condition. In a statement, police say they got a call about an active shooter. And officers say when they arrived, a quote, an interaction occurred between the officers and a male subject, and the subject was shot. Police say they are not looking for any other suspects. Plain pain. A severe pocket of turbulence leaves some 36 people hurt, 11 of them seriously. It happened on a flight from Phoenix to Honolulu yesterday. A spokesperson for the Hawaiian Airlines flight says injuries include a laceration and loss of consciousness, but added that none of the injuries appear life-threatening. Defamation drama. Amber Heard has settled her defamation case brought by her ex-husband, actor Johnny Depp. His lawyers say Heard will pay him $1 million, which his team says he will donate donate to charity. Hurd announced the news on Instagram today and said she made the difficult decision to settle after, quote, having lost faith in the American legal system. This comes after a 6-week televised trial where jurors found Hurd had defamed Depp by writing a Washington Post op-ed and ordered her to pay more than $10 million. And President Biden strongly condemned the rising anti-Semitism in the United States. The president said hate would not prevail during a Hanukkah reception at the White House today. The White House also shared they added a menorah to its holiday lineup for the first time. The event comes as anti-Semitic incidents have been on the rise in the country. Now tonight, dreaming of a white Christmas is nice and all until you get a little too much snow and a little too much cold. And that is what millions of Americans may face when a massive winter storm blankets the country this week. So Santa, watch out. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns has a look at the days ahead. Bill?
Well, good evening to you, and Clay. And this storm is going to be one for the record books. I don't know if we've had a setup for a storm like this right before Christmas in decades. And it's going to be different depending on where you are. East Coast will be warm or rainy, a lot of snow and cold in the middle of the country, but just about everyone east of the Rockies will be impacted. So the first thing we have to set the stage for the storm is the cold air coming down. Right now, the Bismarck area is at -23 wind chill. So that's where the source of the cold air is going to come from for the winter event. And once that storm goes by, it's going to shoot all that cold air to the south. And in anticipation of these really bitterly dangerous wind chills, we have wind chill advisories and warnings and watches all the way down now into North Texas. So when you get these watches and warnings like this, what they're telling you is that if you have any exposure outside for a long period of time, you have a chance of getting frostbite. It can be dangerous. Hopefully you're just going from your car to your house or maybe into the store back to your car. But when wind chills are as low as -40 to -60, that's some dangerous stuff even by northern plain standards. So as far as the winter storm is going to go, we have about 39 million people that are included already in winter storm watches. This number will grow once we include all the Great Lakes and some portions of areas even of the south. So the storm's going to start up in areas in the northwest. Seattle's going to get some snow, and then eventually on Wednesday we're going to take it into the plains. So here's the timing of this, and this is what's most important because everyone has their travel plans or knows someone that's traveling or loved one, and we don't want to get caught in the storm. So Tuesday looks just fine. Wednesday is when the snow breaks out, and it could even be moderate at times. Will not be the best traveling from Bismarck to Minneapolis. A couple inches of snow. I'm sure these people have traveled in it many times. It's not the first snow of this year, so I'm not going to say don't travel on Wednesday, but if you can avoid it, northern Iowa and also into Minnesota, it's best to try to. By the time we get to Thursday, the storm really starts to intensify. Should have a period of heavy snow early in the day in Kansas City, moving towards St. Louis. We should have moderate to heavy snow at times Thursday afternoon into Illinois. Same for Wisconsin. And then eventually Thursday night into Chicago. The temperatures will begin to drop, too, so even if it rained earlier, everything will freeze with snow on top of it, so the roads will be treacherous. Then by the time we get to Friday morning, this is the peak of the storm. The storm will be over the top of Michigan. Really nasty winds on the backside, maybe 60-mile-per-hour wind gusts coming off of Lake Michigan. We could see huge waves, freezing spray, Grand Rapids southwards down the South Bend towards the lakeshore. That's the area of greatest concern. I'm sure we'll be under blizzard warnings throughout this area. They're going to tell people don't travel anywhere in northern Indiana, southern Michigan on Friday. You don't want to risk getting stranded on the roads. It's going to be that bad of a storm. Then in the northeast, we're going to have heavy rain. Gusty winds, especially near the coastal areas. That means significant airport delays, maybe cancellations. And then as that storm kicks through and the cold air moves in, then we're going to see a flash freeze in the Northeast Friday night. And that could be treacherous on the roads, too. So who has a chance for the white Christmas? This is the snowfall prediction all the way out through Sunday. The purple shows you where you have best chance for heavy snow. The blue shows moderate snow and even a chance of some light snow as far south as Tennessee and northern Arkansas and Oklahoma. It does not look like the I-95 cities have much of a chance of seeing anything significant to cover the ground for a white Christmas. And as far as those temperatures go, I mean, this is Friday morning. This will be the peak of the cold blast in South Texas. Of course, everyone remembers the huge issues with all the power outages and pipes bursting in houses a couple winters ago. It'll be about below freezing in Dallas for about 3 straight days. And so we'll be watching this story closely because it's the entire state of Texas. Then by the time we get to Saturday, all of this cold air pushes to the East Coast. It's not so unbearable. I mean, temperatures in the teens. We've dealt dealt with that before. It's not a huge ordeal, but Central Florida going down to freezing can be a big ordeal. So here's how it all plays out. Christmas week forecast. There we are on Wednesday with the snow moving into the middle of the country. By the time we get to Thursday, there's that heavy snow possible. Missouri, Wisconsin, Illinois. Brief period of snow in the Northeast, then rain. That's why I'm not making a big deal about that. I think a lot of it's going to wash away. And then Friday, you don't want to be driving or traveling, Zin Clay, anywhere near the Great Lakes, as our blizzard will be in full force. So Zin Clay, no one asked for a blizzard on Christmas on their wish list, but we're getting it.
We certainly are getting there. NBC's Bill Cairns, thank you so much. Now we're turning overseas. Iran has arrested one of its most celebrated actresses, known for her role in the 2016 Oscar-winning film The Salesman. According to Iranian state media, Taraneh al-Dosti has been charged with spreading falsehoods about anti-government protest. The actress is one of the most prominent people arrested amid nationwide protests that began back in September after a 22-year-old died following her arrest by the country's so-called morality police. The government has cracked down on protesters and recently publicly executed a man for crimes committed during the ongoing unrest. Following his death, the actress posted on Instagram, quote, "Every international organization who is watching this bloodshed and not taking action is a disgrace to humanity." The state media says she was arrested because she did not provide any documents in line with her claims. NBC News Tehran bureau chief Ali Rouzi has more.
Hey, Zin Clay. So Taraneh al-Dosti is one of Iran's most famous actresses, easily recognizable anywhere in the country. She was the star of the Oscar-winning film The Salesman. She's appeared at the Cannes Film Festival, and she has around 8 million followers on Instagram. Now, she's been a very vocal critic of the regime. She has supported the protests since they broke out, and in her last message on Instagram, she posted a picture of herself not wearing the compulsory hijab, holding a note saying "Women, Life, Freedom," which has become the slogan of these protests. She was arrested this weekend by the authorities on charges of spreading false propaganda without any evidence. Trumped-up charges like many other celebrities and ordinary people have faced in Iran since the protest. Now, she's been taken away to jail, and her fate is unclear. But like many, many Iranians in the country, she was doing this because she was completely outraged by the regime, their violent tactics, and their brutal crackdown on people who just wanted civil liberties. It's touched a raw nerve in the country, especially these summary executions of protesters that have been designed to send a chill through society. They are hanged in public in front of an audience from a crane, and their body is left dangling to send fear into society. But it's not only sent fear into society, in equal amounts, it has outraged Iranian people. They are truly angry at what's been going on. Look, this crackdown has ensued now for over 3 months. The authorities in Iran have killed almost 500 people. They've arrested over 18,000 people. There have been allegations of unspeakable human rights abuses on the streets and in the jail. And all the regime has been able to do is fight itself into a stalemate. And the expectation is that more protests are coming. Sinclair?
Important reporting, Ali Rouzi. Thank you. Now to Peru, where the government says most of the foreign tourists trapped at Machu Picchu have been evacuated after political unrest stranded hundreds at the World Heritage Site. Many Americans making their way out by foot after an evacuation train carrying 300 people was stopped in its tracks.
It was very difficult, but we walked 18 miles to the nearest town that we could get possibly a bus out of.
This all follows protests that spread quickly throughout Peru in the last 10 days. It all began when former President Pedro Castillo was impeached, arrested, and detained. Our friends at NBC News Chicago have more on an American couple still looking for a way out of Peru.
It's a vacation Jack Van Overloop and his partner Nate Wong are desperate to finish. Billed as a fun trip before the holidays, their getaway to Peru is one they can't get back from.
Ever since last week, Monday, we've kind of just been stuck here.
This week, Peru declared a state of emergency while it is in the middle of political turmoil. Riots and looting have closed airports and roads and left thousands of tourists like Wong and Van Overloop in limbo.
It's kind of been a roller coaster of emotions.
Hoping the unrest would calm down at first, they stayed in Peru. But midway through a scenic tour, they realized their situation changed.
We were on a tour and we were on the top of the cathedral and we saw like 3 different smoke clouds. And then we asked the tour guide what's going on. And that's when she said, yeah, the protesters are lighting fires. They stormed the airport. The airport's closed. We're just like, wait, what? We were supposed to fly out tonight. And she was just like, no, absolutely, you're not flying out tonight.
Delay after delay, cancellation after cancellation. Their quest to leave the country has been trial and error for almost a week.
That's been, I would say, the most frustrating thing about this situation is there is no source of truth.
Van Overloop says the American embassy has been responsive, but not very helpful, telling them little more than to sit tight and wait for a flight. The airport they hope to use has been closed all weekend.
If the airport opens tomorrow as planned, I think we're in great shape to leave on Wednesday. But if it doesn't, then, I mean, we're kind of back to square one.
Square one is sit and rebook, missing work, friends, and family on a trip that, even with a positive attitude, can become memorable for all the wrong reasons.
It's not like the adventure we wanted, but it's certainly an adventure. So we're going to look back and laugh at it one day. But it's not today.
Up next, we're back in the U.S. where the Tennessee State House wants to put a drag on drag queens. We'll hear from performers about how a new bill could limit their work and whether anti-LGBTQ sentiment is to blame. Welcome back. I'm Zinklea Samwa, and lawmakers are proposing restrictions that could negatively affect drag queens and their performances. This comes as anti-LGBTQ protests and threats have targeted more than 140 drag shows just this year. But one group of drag queens in Tennessee is getting ready to fight these bills. NBC's Kathy Park has more.
Veronica Electronica's 21 and Up weekend brunch show is a staple of Nashville's drag scene. But today, the show stops for an announcement.
They want to make drag performances illegal if it's in the public view. So right now, if that law passes, I would be committing a potential felony. Just letting you know.
Tennessee Republican State Senate Majority Leader Jack Johnson introduced Senate Bill 3.
The intent of the legislation is just to simply say that you cannot have sexually explicit entertainment, adult-themed entertainment, in a public venue where kids might be present.
The LGBTQ plus community have come out saying, look, it targets our community. How do you respond to that?
Well, I disagree. We're protecting kids and families and parents who want to be able to take their kids to public places. We're not attacking anyone or targeting anyone. I've heard references to this bill that it will ban drag shows. Well, no, it won't. It just says you can't do something that's sexually explicit. It won't prevent someone dressed in drag from being in a parade or being in public.
But Veronica and LGBTQ advocates worry this legislation could create misconceptions that drag is inherently sexual.
I don't know who will be the drag police to judge whether my performance was adult-oriented.
What does it mean when someone who is dancing shakes their hips? Cheerleaders clearly do it. Dance teams clearly do it. If a drag queen does it, does that suddenly make it sexual?
Bianca Del Rio, love that dress.
The audience for drag is growing. Drag Story Hour, a nonprofit that holds book readings for kids with drag hosts, went from 1 chapter in 2015 to 45 in the U.S. today. But interest in drag comes amid Republican lawmakers in at least 5 states considering bills to limit drag when children are present. Earlier this month, far-right groups, including the Proud Boys and some armed members, shut down an Ohio drag story time.
Life, liberty, victory, or death!
Tennessee has seen 6 events targeted, plus swirling outrage online over videos like this one, showing what appears to be children handing dollar bills to a drag performer.
There have been news reports about some of these events taking place where parents are there with their kids and they were mortified. That's who reached out to me and some of my colleagues and led us to pursue this legislation.
For Veronica, outrage like this shows a misunderstanding of drag culture. She says tipping is not sexual.
We tip our servers, we tip our bartenders, we tip our hairstylists, and we tip our drag queens. It's just a gesture of appreciation.
Senator Johnson plans to move quickly on the bill after the new year.
As a parent, it's something that I worry about all the time, what my kids are being exposed to.
Now Veronica and her fellow drag queens are ramping up for the political fight of their lives on and off the stage. Kathy Park, NBC News, Nashville.
Thanks for staying on that story for us, Kathy. And before we go, we got your 60 seconds of joy. And tonight, that involves a little girl and her pet unicorn. Yeah, you won't want to miss this one. That's coming up on Now Tonight after the break. All right, before we go, the headlines are not always bleak, but you might not know it from watching the news. So here are your 60 seconds of joy. Paralympic swimmer Mallory Wegman took home silver this weekend at the U.S. National Championships, and she did it while 6 months pregnant. Yes, women are amazing. The three-time Paralympic gold medalist calls herself a mom on a mission. Wegman says she's focused on showcasing what's possible, especially for women with disabilities. And Tom Cruise is sending a message from above this holiday season. The actor, well known for doing his own stunts, recorded this thank you to fans while, get this, skydiving. This man does not do anything halfway.
Thank you for allowing us to entertain you. It truly is the honor of a lifetime.
Cruise filmed that wild video while on set in South Africa for his upcoming Mission Impossible movie. And one lucky girl just received her official unicorn license a few weeks ago. 7-year-old Madeline wrote to LA County Department of Animal Care and Control. She asked for permission to keep a unicorn in her backyard if she could find one. On Friday, her wish came true. She was presented with a pre-approved unicorn license by the agency's director. Madeline, we hope you find your unicorn soon. I know I'm looking for mine. And that does it for this hour. Thank you so much for ending your day right with Now Tonight. I'm Zinklea Samoa. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.